Young and Brave, Paul's Letter of Wisdom. Based on 1 Timothy, King James Version, long ago, in the days after Jesus had returned to heaven, there was a young man named Timothy. Timothy wasn't like most people his age. He loved to read the scriptures and to help others. His grandmother Lois and his mother Eunice taught him about God from the time he was very little. One day, Timothy met Paul, a wise apostle who traveled to teach about Jesus. Paul saw something special in Timothy, a heart full of faith, kindness, and courage. "Timothy," Paul said with a warm smile, "God has great plans for you." From that day on, Timothy became Paul's helper. Together, they walked dusty roads, crossed rivers, and visited towns where people had never heard of Jesus. Years later, Timothy stayed in a city called Ephesus to help lead the believers there. Paul, who loved Timothy like a son, wrote him a special letter we now call 1 Timothy. The words in that letter are still read today because they hold important lessons. Paul wrote, "Let no man despise thy youth, but be thou an example of the believers, in word, in conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, in purity." 1 Timothy 4:12, KJV. Paul knew Timothy was young, and some older people might think he couldn't lead. But Paul reminded Timothy and all of us that it's not age that matters most, but how we live, speak kindly, love others, and keep our hearts pure. In his letter, Paul gave Timothy many instructions. He taught him that leaders should be honest, gentle, and not greedy. Paul said church leaders must care about people, help the poor, and not fight. He also warned Timothy about false teachers, people who spread wrong ideas just to get rich or become popular. Paul wrote, "For the love of money is the root of all evil." 1 Timothy 6:10, KJV. This meant Timothy had to remind everyone to seek God first, not treasures or riches. Paul also told Timothy that people should pray everywhere, and that men and women should live with kindness and respect. Paul encouraged Timothy to fight the good fight of faith. It wasn't about real fighting, but standing strong in faith even when life was hard. He also reminded Timothy to keep his heart close to God's word and not be afraid to teach, guide, and care for the believers in Ephesus. Paul's letter ends with warm words, reminding Timothy to trust God, do good, and share with those in need. Timothy's story teaches us that God can use anyone young or old who loves him and wants to help others. Paul's words still inspire us to be kind, share what we know about God, stand up for what's right, live with faith, love, and purity. Timothy's courage and Paul's wisdom remind us that no matter how young we are, we can all shine God's light in our words and actions.